The following talk was given at the Insight Meditation Center in Redwood City, California. Please visit our website at audiodharma.org.
So good evening and welcome back. And perhaps we could also start this week with some questions or comments you have. Those of you who have been doing the loving kindness practice in between the classes, if you have anything you would like to bring up or ask, or this is a good time to do that as people are still coming in. Yes, please.
I have kind of a silly question. Yes.
I was just wondering how you can do loving kindness when you're gardening, because I always feel like a murderer when I'm gardening.
How can you do loving kindness when you're gardening? There's obvious murder going on in the garden if you are, killing the snails or the gophers. And there's the much less obvious murder goes on, because it's not intentional, but killing that goes on when you blink your eyes, and there's all these bacteria there that get smothered each time, or your mouth, there's life and death going on all the time there. And so same thing in the garden, right? You put your shovel in the garden, and there's no intention, but there's all these little life forms there that somehow get disrupted, and some die. They come to the surface, they dry out. So, anybody who thinks about these things has to figure out the ethics of that for themselves, and figure out what the trade-off is or what seems appropriate for them. And some people will avoid any kind of gardening at all. Buddhist monastics, monks and nuns in Thailand, for example, will avoid any kind of gardening whatsoever, except really anything, because they don't want to be involved in any kind of damaging of life. But it's a little bit, it's a little bit odd, because then they just let other people do the gardening and eat their food. So, what's that about? And so you have to make that decision. So, are you talking about the subtle dying that goes on, or are you talking about the obvious ones, the gophers and the snails?
Taking out plants, and because we really, it's really subjective. What is a weed and what's not a weed? And I feel like I'm just like
that way. So in Buddhism, the feeling is that the plants are not sentient in the same kind of way as a animate life is. So for example, like a bug or an insect or a gopher, plants don't have the same nervous system, and so the ethics around that is very different, because plants can neither be happy nor suffer. So to say, may you be happy to a plant, you can say, may you grow well. So I think that's kind of, usually in Buddhism, that's exempted from any concern like that. Now, some people feel a kind of identification or closeness with plants, so they have to sort that out for themselves. And I know that I was a gardener in the monastery, and I loved it. I was kind of inefficient, because what I liked most doing was going around in the morning, first thing, and just kind of looking at all the plants. And kind of had this kind of warm paternal feeling for every plant. Just look at it and love it and just appreciate it, and go on to the next one, see what it changed overnight, and look at it. And I would never get around to the work, because I just loved. It felt so good just to go around and have this loving feeling for each of the plants and everything. And I was in the monastery. I was doing a lot of meditation. I was pretty still and quiet and very open, and so it was very easy to have that kind of feeling for the plants. So it's kind of loving kindness, wishing them well, putting water on them and fertilizing them and, caring them. So that's nice. And then you have to eat them, so some of them at least. And so is that betraying them, betraying your love, been loving you so carefully for so long, and now I'm just yanking you out of the ground. But when I was a gardener, I would think about the people I was feeding. It felt so good and happy that here I was going to have this food, homegrown, and I would offer it to the other people in the monastery and be cooked. And so, I never had a problem with the loving kindness in the plants. I felt this warm feeling, very nice feeling for it all. I had an issue around the gophers, and then the monastery was left to each gardener to decide for him or herself what to do about the gophers. And so it was my decision, and so I decided that that it was a trade-off between the life of the garden and the food that it made for the people in the monastery and the life of the gopher. And so I decided that that trade-off was more valuable to the life of the garden, what the garden brought into the world. And so I decided to have traps for the gophers. I'm not saying that's the right thing. I don't know if I'd do that again now, but when I was 25 then, and that's the decision I made. So other questions about the practice? Especially maybe last week's instructions on the neutral people. But
I don't think this is especially relevant to any particular group, but sometimes the practice seems fraudulent.
Fraudulent?
Fraudulent. And it seems fraudulent because at the time that I'm wishing these things, I know perfectly well that nothing will happen. In other words, if I'm wishing a person who is terminally ill to be well, or someone who is sick, and I say it has special relevance because 3 of my friends have died within the last couple of months. So I knew that they would never. I knew they had the kind of illness that from which they would not recover. So my wishing them well seemed wasteful or inappropriate, or since I knew that, of course, I knew that my wishing isn't going to create anything.
Yeah. So
but it felt fraudulent to me.
So you're fraudulent because you're wishing them well when they were never going to get well.
Yeah.
Well, there's different ways of being well, and so there's a distinction that people make between curing and healing. And there are people who never get cured; they end up dying. But in the process of their dying, they get healed. And what they mean healed is they get healed psychologically or spiritually, heartfully. And there are people who spend a whole life in tremendous conflict and fear and anger and aversion to death, to life, to people, and they're broken-hearted people. And they know they're going to die, but they get healed in the process of their last days, last months, and they die at peace or die resolved with certain issues. And so when you wish someone well who's dying, you don't wish them, may you get up and start dancing the samba again or something. You wish them well, and you hope that somehow that process of dying, that they get healed, this kind of inner way, that they die as peacefully and happily as possible. And there's plenty of people who go through a very difficult process of dying only to get through it and find that in the last period before they die, they find a very profound peace because they've resolved something or dealt with something. A story I like to tell from a member of our community that died many years ago. The thing he was most afraid of in his life was to get cancer, and he seemingly most afraid of. And he was very anxious, spent his whole life being anxious. I knew him as being an anxious man. So he got cancer. And then at some point, not because he was afraid of it, but then he got the cancer. And then at some point it was clear he was going to die. And when it was clear he was going to die, the thing he was afraid of, he didn't have to be afraid of anymore. And it was remarkable to see the transformation. And his anxiety, his fear, his timidity disappeared. And he entered that last period of his life with tremendous grace and courage and strength and peace. And it was really something to see. So does that answer your question? Over here.
I've been having a little bit of a problem with the expression, may you be happy. Because for me, the happiness seems like a very superficial feeling. And also, when I think about certain sociopaths in our society, I certainly don't want them to be happy. I don't want them to be well. I want it to be free of many things, but I don't want happiness in the narrow sense because they do horrible things when they're happy sometimes. So for me, I've been using other things to replace happiness because to me it's not a term that seems to fit what I'm trying to achieve.
Great. That's great that you bring that up. And the phrases that I've been giving you are more or less the classical phrases, or modern renditions of classical ones. And but you're very welcome to make up your own phrases. And in different situations, different words or concepts are useful. And so, for example, with someone who's a sociopath, maybe what you do is you wish that they have a change of mind. You wish them not happiness where they get manic and do terrible things, but you wish them may you feel safe, may you be secure, maybe be settled in your life.
I wish that they may be free of suffering, because I believe that if they're free of suffering, they'll also be behaving with less.
So that might be appropriate to do it that way. And in Buddhism, we would say then you're doing compassion meditation, because compassion meditation is very similar to loving kindness meditation, but it has to do with when you encounter someone who's suffering, and we feel empathically their suffering and want them to be free of that suffering, then we do this compassion. So there might be some people you're better off doing compassion practice with than loving kindness. And so I think in each situation where you offer loving kindness or offer your goodwill to someone, you might want to consider what's the appropriate thing to wish for them. Because the important part of this practice is your wishing. What can you sincerely wish in the form of goodwill, something good for this person? And for different situations, it might be a little different. So someone who's, I guess a sociopath, who acts worse when they're happy, you don't want to say, well, then be unhappy, so you can. But you might say, may you be restful or peaceful or settled or something.
So my experience was actually about the neutral. And although I've done this before, I think I was really kind of speed reading through the neutrals or skimming over the neutrals. And my neutral, he's very neutral. He's a very neutral person. And what I found fascinating was watching my mind really scramble to try to create meaning and context for my neutral. So I would be, wishing him well, and then all of a sudden I'd get these thoughts that would bubble up, and at first they were positive, like, oh, he's probably a great dad, or, just really not, and I don't know anything about this man.
Right.
I know nothing about him. And then that obviously didn't entertain my brain enough, so then I would, these thoughts would just, negative things would come up, just really making up stories. And so I was really working with trying to remain really open and really generous and loving to someone who I really tried to maintain a complete neutrality, not make up stories, not add things to him, just kind of keep it neutral. And it was just fascinating. Mostly it was fascinating watching my mind try to come up with all this stuff, which was just distracting, really. At least for me.
So that part of the function of any practice in Buddhism is not necessarily to succeed in the practice, but to have the practice help you understand yourself better. So you see what your mind does in story making. But in doing a neutral person, you're not supposed to kind of try to keep them in the neutral category. Like, you better stay there, or be neutral, stay neutral. And if I start feeling I like the person a little bit too much, I'm going to start thinking about, they're probably a terrible dad, and okay, that brings it back down more neutral. And within reason, we use our imagination, our story making, realistically best we can, to help us get a positive regard on someone. And so you don't have to put that part of you don't have to leave that part of you out, that ability of yours, but to use it. And but the guideline around using your imagination is, don't use your imagination in such a way that it activates and agitates the mind, gets it spinning and running. Use it in such a way that it settles and brings the mind more peace. And as a regular, steady, loving kindness practice, concentrates the mind, settles the mind, stabilizes the mind, helps the mind get quite still. And so is the imagination helping that process? But yeah, think about, whatever you can to think about ways that give you realistically a positive regard. Don't make up fantasies about the person, but other ways which you can kind of. And what we're trying to do here in loving kindness practice is to expand how we regard others, so that we're more likely inclined to see them with good intentions, have good intentions for them, around them. So one more, and then I'll.
Last week I had the opportunity to go to traffic court for the first time, and I had the doors opened at 9:30, but you weren't allowed into the courtroom till 9, and there were already dozens of people standing in line out in the cold at 7:30. And I just started practicing the metta for each person, and I would kind of stare at them, and at first I felt uncomfortable, but people don't stare back usually. People avert their gaze. And it became really interesting, and the more I did it, the closer I felt to the people, and the less I was judging them by the way they looked, because there were clearly some people who had been in prison. They had the tattoos, the tears on their faces, and there were a lot of people there who didn't have licenses, and it wasn't criminal court, it was civil, but there were some pretty scary looking people. And then a lot of people looked dismayed and worried that they couldn't afford the fines. And it was really interesting. And by the time I kind of got done, and I was surprised I could stand for an hour and a half. And the amazing thing is by getting near the end, I wanted to hug every single person. And I knew they would take me out, the security guards would take me out if I started doing that. And it was really interesting. And kind of a weird, maybe a karma thing happened, is I started doing it in court too with the judge, who was very severe. And I was really surprised, and I just said, "Good morning, Your Honor," and I smiled at him, and I had been wishing him it. And when it came to my thing, he took $100 off. He just said, "I'm going to reduce it by $100." So that was, and I don't really believe in the magic of cause and effect, like Bewitched, But I just thought it was very interesting. And what would have been a difficult situation, just standing for an hour and a half, went by very fast.
Beautiful. So that's quite significant. I've known, just a little footnote to that, I've known people who have been gone in for surgery, and they're laying there on the bed, what's it called, Guernsey, what's it called? Gurney. They're laying there on the gurney, and they're waiting, for this thing to happen. They feel hopeless, powerless, and there's nothing they can do. And they've been surgeries before where they felt kind of powerless. And then they've learned this metta practice, and they lay there on the gurney, kind of doing loving kindness meditation, and they feel like, oh, finally, there's something I can do, and it made a big difference for them, just laying there. So, in terms of there are people who believe in the magic power of loving kindness. It has magical effects on people and things like that. I also don't believe in the magic, but I do believe in subtle cues. And I think there are subtle routes in which we influence each other. And people don't even know sometimes what they're picking up from each other. They're so subtle. So it could be, that you stand a little bit more closely to people in a way that kind of makes them feel safer around you, rather than standing on the other side of the room, or your gaze is kind of softer towards them as opposed to always averting and looking away, and that people are influenced by that, and many other things. Maybe there's a little bit more of a smile on your face, rather than being kind of grumpy looking, and that people are influenced by that. So I think there's many, many unseen ways in which the intention or the practice of loving kindness travels out beyond us, and many of them are I think they can go quite far as the network goes out. But I think it's all ordinary cause and effect if you really could see it. So welcome back. So this is the last week of our 4-week class on metta meditation, loving kindness meditation. In Buddhism, we don't leave love to chance. And to some degree, we can also help dispose ourselves so we're more likely to feel kindness, love, generosity of spirit to other people. The Buddha said that whatever a person frequently ponders and reflects upon becomes the inclination of mind. So if you're always thinking about how terrible everybody is, gossiping and sniping at people, then it becomes more of a habit to do that. But if you don't do it, then regularly and over again, it doesn't become so much of a habit. And then, but if instead you're regularly thinking kindly about people, looking at people's best qualities, speaking about their best qualities, then that becomes an inclination of the mind. So what inclination of the mind would you like? What responsibility are you going to take for the direction of your mind, how you see the world, how you select out of your environment what you think is important? And if being friendly, if being kind, if having goodwill, if having love for people is of value for you, then Buddhism says, great, and you could do something to cultivate, to develop that, to make it more an inclination of the mind. And so we have this practice called loving kindness practice, or metta meditation. And as I've said before, we always start with the people. It's an intention practice, not a feeling practice. Feelings come and they support it and they're part of it, but don't expect a feeling of love or kindness, whatever. It's really an intention practice where you wish or you have the desire, the aspiration that someone be happy, safe, healthy, have some kind of goodness in their life, something that's good. So sometimes it's translated as goodwill for other people. And we usually start with the people it's easiest to do it towards. And so in ancient Buddhism, they thought it was the self, so they start there. But you don't have to start with yourself. You can, if that's not easy. But and the idea is to find the intention of goodwill to that easy person, and while you're thinking about the person or holding the person in your heart, then give expression to that intention in a calm, relaxed, meditative way, silently, as a way of kind of nourishing or supporting or watering the seeds of that intention, letting it grow. In the process of doing that, if warm, loving feelings of some kind bubble up, if you become happier as the process goes along, then let that grow and develop and spread throughout your being. It's been pointed out often enough, I think, that when people stroke their cats, who is it that's benefiting? The cat starts purring, perhaps, but people, most people don't do it just because the cat purrs. It feels really nice. It's something very nourishing for the person who's doing the petting, that kind of contact. I know someone who volunteers at the Children's Hospital in Oakland, and took a while before he was graduated to be able to do this kind of volunteer work. But his work is he goes in, I think at least once a week for several hours, and he holds premature babies, because it's very important that premature babies get held and have that physical contact with people. So he goes and just holds them, and it's very, very moving for him. And it's been very deeply, he's kind of an analytical person, kind of in his head a lot, and this has really softened and opened his heart dramatically. And just, you kind of, you take care of a baby. And many people find that, right? So that somehow holding a baby, who benefits? It's sometimes in both ways. Hopefully the baby, hopefully the cat benefits, but we do also. And I think that points to the magic, or points to, I think, what's very, very unique about human relationships is the degree to which they're mutual. We mutually affect each other, but also the way we relate to other people somehow or other also affects us. So if we hate someone, really angry on someone, we won't want them to know how angry we are, because we're going to really give it to them. Maybe we succeed in giving it to them and really intimidating them or something, but the cost on us is great. And so we feel there's a lot of tension, a lot of stress that goes into our system and our muscles and our mind and our heart. And if you really pay attention to the cost of being angry, you probably realize that it's costing you much more than it's costing them. And why would you do it if you see the cost? So it affects us. Same thing with kindness, with love, with friendliness. We might say it's all for the other person's sake. But while we're being kind to someone else, it changes who we are. And it softens us, it relaxes people. There's an expression, approach and soothe, that as we approach people who are suffering with kindness and goodwill and compassion, there's a biological system in place that actually supports a person relaxing, softening, coming forward in a soothing way. Heart rate changes, the blood rate changes. A lot of things change physiologically when we enter into this kind of kind, loving kind of mode. So who benefits? And we benefit as well. It's a mutual benefit system. So we benefit as well. And it's possible to offer our kindness to someone else and feel some well-being because of that. Feel some happiness, some lightness, some joy, some relaxation because of that. And so as we do the loving kindness practice, that feedback system there, we wish someone well, but to offer it cleanly from a place deep in our hearts, then it also begins to kind of affect us. It changes us. It changes us physiologically, and it bubbles up, delight and joy perhaps. But it also, more important than how we feel, because Buddhism doesn't put such a big emphasis on how we feel, as some people here in the modern West really focus on how I feel is so important. Feeling is important, but much more important in Buddhist spirituality is our intention, the aspiration that we have, because that has much longer term value. Your feelings come and go, but if your life is orientation in life is founded on certain intentions, those intentions then will carry you into many different situations, and you'll find out how to apply them. So as we do the loving kindness practice, some people will find that they feel better because of it, and that's one of the reasons why it's done. It's to soften the heart, relax the body, settle us in some beautiful way. So today's topic is loving kindness for difficult people. So the categories we've done so far, we've done 4 categories. We've done self, the benefactor, the friend, and the neutral person. And so today I'll introduce you to what's called the difficult person. In the ancient Buddhist texts, they don't use the word difficult person, they say enemy. But here in the modern West, the most Western Dharma teachers don't use the word enemy, they use the difficult people. People for whom you don't like, you have aversion to, maybe people who are hostile to you, people who are just kind of very disagreeable to be around. It's very difficult to feel any kindness towards them. So anybody for whom it's difficult to feel friendliness or kindness towards is your difficult person. It says in the ancient texts that if you have no enemies, then you don't have to do this category. So if you have no difficult people in your life, then you don't have to do this. You can skip this and go home early if you like. And not a few people I've known have used politicians as their difficult people, particular ones. Depending where you are in the political persuasion, it depends which direction you. And now, when we talk about difficult people, it's a chance to talk a little bit more precisely, perhaps, or in a nuanced way about this word, metta. So it's M-E-T-T-A is the Indian word that's usually translated as loving kindness. I like the word a lot. And I like the idea of the word kindness a lot. But it implies maybe a little bit, unfortunately, you're supposed to be kind all the time. And perhaps that's not really at the forefront of what needs to happen to some people. There are people whom maybe you don't like, and you're not expected to start liking them. But you can have goodwill for them. You can wish them well. You can have well-wishing for them. may you. So the Buddha gave an example, not of people, but with snakes and scorpions, where he taught this loving kindness practice to be used to snakes and scorpions. And he says, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be, whatever else he said. And then he said, and then when he finished doing those things, he said, and now go away. And so so some people, it's too high of a hurdle to do loving kindness practice if you think you're supposed to like the people, or you're supposed to kind of find some way to be kind and sweet to them. They don't have to know that you're doing the practice, and which makes it a lot easier, because then if we think they're going to know that we're doing it for them, then we feel embarrassed or upset, or it doesn't seem fair, or they're going to take advantages of us, or something. But this can be a very private practice, and maybe you're the one who's to benefit the most. You're trying to overcome the ways in which your heart is closed or hostile, and it doesn't have to change anything in your real-world relationships. If it's a difficult person because they really are difficult, and it's really difficult to hang out with them, and you'd rather not be close to them, you could do your loving kindness to them from far away, and open your heart and make sure your heart is not closed to them. But you don't have to then go invite them in for tea. So sometimes the word loving kindness doesn't quite capture the right nuance here, and perhaps the word goodwill, if it works better. That you're trying to have goodwill even to people you don't like, or have goodwill to people who you'd rather not have much contact with, but you at least want to have that goodwill. And so, for example, I've had people who I didn't really care for very much, didn't like very much, and mostly I chose not to spend time with them. But if there was an opportunity to talk about them to other people, like we for some reason had business to take care of, it involved talking about that person, then I can feel my goodwill in the forefront, and then I'll try to talk in ways that expresses kindness or goodwill or well-wishing for them. I'll speak about speak about them in nice ways, so other people think about them nicely, and somehow there's I don't go kind of complain about them and get upset about them and say, can you believe what this person did? And I say, the person's, that person's really kind to his kids, and I don't say all the other things because it's unnecessary, and because I believe that I do feel some goodwill, but that doesn't translate to wanting to be close to them. Make some sense? And so for some people, this makes it a lot easier to do this practice towards the difficult people. In doing it towards difficult people, you want to do it after you've done it to others, these other categories, to where it's easy. So you get you open up, your goodwill is there, you have some flow of kindness, of love going. And then you only do it to the people to the difficult people when you want to. You're under no obligation to do it. And it isn't like this is a manual, like, okay, I've done 5 minutes on this self, 5 minutes on benefactor and friend, and 5 minutes on neutral people, and now there's 5 minutes left in my meditation, so now I'll do the last category. And I'm supposed to, because it's supposed to do all 5 categories. And that's why I'll do it. I think don't do it for that reason. Only do it when you feel ready, because you would like to have feelings of goodwill, generous kind of feelings, for someone who's difficult in your life. And then remember that having desire for goodwill towards that person is different than having it. And so don't confuse the two, because if you confuse the two, then you might think, I can't do it. But simply saying, it would be really good if someday I could find in my heart some feeling of friendliness or generosity of spirit to this person. I wish that could happen. And let's see now how that can happen. Let's work towards that. So, but if you don't feel like some inkling of a desire to do that, maybe you shouldn't do it at all. Just stay with the neutral people, stay with the other people. until at some point, sooner or later, I believe, if you do this practice long enough, you'll come across a difficult person. It'll occur to you, I would like to generate more kindness or goodwill to this person. And then, but the suggestion is, don't start with really difficult people. Start with really mildly difficult. So you begin stretching yourself and exploring the territory just a little bit, and finding out, what it takes. And one option is to choose someone who might even be a good friend, so you already have a lot of good feelings for and kindness usually. But last Monday, they said this mean thing to you, and so you're still smarting from that and feel like, but they've become my difficult person. And then perhaps you could begin kind of using them as your difficult person, but then it's easier to begin stretching and opening up because you have a backlog or background of goodwill already there. Or maybe it's someone who's more or less a neutral person in your life, someone you don't know very well, but maybe it's your mail carrier who you see every day, maybe, but never had any contact with, you don't know anything about. But recently, they just didn't put the letters in the mailbox properly. So they were sticking out of this flap or something, and they fell on the ground, didn't see it, and so you feel, how could they do that? And you feel a little bit irritated, and so that's your difficult person. It's a pretty mild thing, so it's easier then to begin working the edges of what would it take? How do I regard this person? What do I have to do inside of me? What do I have to relax with me? What are the attitudes I have to let go of, or change of heart that I need to have? And then slowly begin working up to the people who's most difficult. And one of the amazing capacities that human beings have is to love our enemies, to love people who have caused tremendous harm in our lives, to have a profound process of forgiveness going on, a profound process of opening up and seeing them, and some of these events where people have this change of heart towards others are quite phenomenal. People who have forgiven and offer their tremendous help and support to people who have murdered a family member. I met when I was in San Quentin with lifers. I was there in April, and a violence prevention program at San Quentin for people some of them had been there for almost 40 years, and most of the people we talked to are people who had been involved in murder or attempted murder, and it was quite something to watch. They were in a violence prevention program and meditation program, and it was remarkable to see how much they had transformed themselves, and they had also the same. I didn't see this, but they had the same program. They had a victim. I don't know what it's called. Victim. What is it called? Reconciliation. Yeah, victim perpetrator reconciliation, where victims and perpetrators meet each other, and they don't at San Quentin have the actual people who did the crimes with each other meet, but they have people who had victims of similar crimes meet prisoners who've done the crime like that, and they meet, and it's quite something. To meet and the stories of what happens there and the change of heart that goes on. So I'm sure you've encountered in various places situations where people do amazing things, and it's hard to do, and sometimes it's only really possible when you find yourself in really extreme, unimaginable situations that part of you is called forth. But the practice of loving kindness is pointing in that direction. How do we expand our goodwill, generous spirit, friendliness towards people for whom it's very, very, very hard to do? Remember, you've come to a Buddhist center, a religious center, and religions of all stripes put a very high standard about how thoroughly a human person can be transformed and changed. And so if your religion doesn't challenge you, it's probably not doing its job. So here, this is one place where you're being challenged to look a little bit. Can you open to these people as well, to difficult people? And what does it take? So it's a slow process. It can be very profound, very trying to open up to difficult people, to include them, and don't expect it to be easy all the time. And sometimes it's a real wrestling match inside, where a lot of doubt, a lot of anger, a lot of criticism, a lot of a lot of issues, a lot of things come up to the surface as we're trying to do it to difficult people. And so it might take a long time with one individual person to really find a way to that. Don't feel bad that it's difficult. Feel really good that you're wrestling. It's really a great thing to be able to do and be engaged in that process. That make sense? So, let's do some meditation. And if you'd like to stand and stretch, shake out as you see fit. So for this meditation, we'll start with ourselves and then go through some of the categories and then inch our way into a little bit the difficult people. And maybe it's nice before we actually start meditating, maybe with your eyes closed or open, just take a few moments here to consider or to find a mildly difficult person that you might want to include here or bring in to your life right now. It could be someone you hardly know, it could be someone, anything. Someone's pretty mildly, but and then kind of like just file away that person, that name, so it's handy in a little while. So gently close your eyes and begin by feeling your body here. Feel your body on the chair or your cushion. Feel a global awareness of what's going on in your body now, how your body feels at this time in life, this time of day. And see if you can be easy about how you're feeling. If you're feeling comfortable or uncomfortable, however you're feeling, be easy about it. And then within the body, as part of the body, take a few long, slow, deep breaths. As you breathe in, perhaps you can feel like you're massaging yourself from the inside. And as you breathe out, relax. Maybe even soothe yourself on the exhale. And then letting your breath return to normal. Breathe in a simple way. And as you exhale, see if you can soften, relax your shoulders. Relax the muscles of your face. And perhaps relax your belly. And that simple relaxation is the beginning of feeling goodwill toward yourself, taking care of yourself. We say in Buddhism that you are as worthy and an appropriate recipient of your love as any other person is in this world. There's an equality. That says that it's beautiful, appropriate for you to see yourself with kind regard, to have a generosity of heart towards yourself. Now, you might see if you can remember some time in your life where you had some simple, easy happiness, a happy time. Bring back the memory of that time, the sights, the smells, the sounds. If you can visualize, maybe visualize the scene, or just simply think about the situation, the happiness, and see if you can remember what it felt like to be happy. The physical sense of well-being or happiness. Feel the places in your body that get activated when you were happy that way. And then letting go of the memories and being here in this body. Being close, being in touch with, being aware of these areas of your body, of your being, that is capable of happiness. And then consider how wonderful it would be if this could be a more regular part of your life, this happiness. And that you wish it for yourself. You wish it without expectation or demand, but just a simple wish. May it be so. May I be happy. And that wish for your own happiness and well-being, see if you can give voice to it silently by repeating these phrases that I'll say out loud. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be at ease. And as you repeat these phrases again, as you say the last word, see if you can maybe say it on the exhale if it's easy, but as you say it, let something in your body relax and open. Shoulders, chest, heart. Open up to the meaning behind each of the last words. May I be happy. May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be at ease. And then bring to mind either a benefactor or a friend, someone for whom it's easy for you to have goodwill for. Someone for whom you have a easy time thinking about how wonderful it would be if they could really be happy. How wonderful it would be if they could thrive and be peaceful. Did you really wish for this person to have it? Something you would even help make happen if you could? And keeping this person in mind, repeat the following. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. And we'll do it one more time for this person. And as you come and stand with each phrase, see if something inside of you can soften or relax or open towards this person. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. And now bring to mind that mildly difficult person. And take your time with it. First kind of get a real sense of the person's presence, maybe by visualizing them or remembering kind of felt sense what it's like to be with them, or just some memory of being with them. Whatever you can to make them come a little bit more vivid for you here. And then as you consider them, can you find some wish inside of you, some aspiration, desire, or recognition that it would be a good thing if this person could be happy? It would be a good thing if this person could be peaceful, safe. How might you regard or look on this person so that you have some goodwill in their direction? And then recognizing or finding this wish for their well-being. Repeat these phrases. And see if something can open or relax or soften in you towards them as you say them. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. Perhaps considering that this person has many different sides to his or her life. The person's had his or her struggles and suffering, joys and successes. People who loved them and people who didn't. Thinking that this person has a capacity for happiness. And then see if you can open to them with these words. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. And then we'll say it one more time. And then each time you say it, see if you can soften some tension or holding that you have in relationship to this person. Some way in which maybe you keep yourself braced or held back. Some way in which perhaps you're not really willing to see them completely. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. And then to end this sitting, take a deep breath or two and let go of all the thoughts, concerns you might have. Come back into your breathing. And ride on your breathing, ride on your inhales and exhales. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So the two most common purposes for doing this loving kindness practice are, first, to cultivate more goodwill. Goodwill here, the heart of it is an intention, not a feeling. So a wish of goodwill, wishing someone well, well-wishing. And the second purpose is to help the mind get concentrated, calm, steadied, stable. One is a opening to loving kindness. The other is using loving kindness practice as a way of developing concentration. The two are not opposed to each other. or they can be done together or separately. Those two or kind of. It's possible to just want to focus on the loving kindness aspect. Maybe forgiveness needs to happen. Maybe some opening, some working through something needs to happen, so you can really be friendly to someone. You want to have open your heart in some more fuller way. So that's all you want. You don't care about concentration. You just want to do some goodwill. When you do it only for that purpose, some people find it really helpful to be creative about it. Use their own phrases, change the phrases a lot, sing the tune, sing it as a tune, even anything at all that helps you. Visualize the person. You can be quite creative. You don't think of it. This is a fixed way of doing this practice. This is the way Gil said it. I have to do it that way. It's just you can just use your imagination, whatever helps you, in cultivating that goodwill. If what you want to do is develop concentration, then you don't want to be so creative, because the creativity of changing and doing all this stuff keeps the mind more active and involved. And so what you want to do then is you want to keep it really simple. Maybe use the same phrases over and over again. Usually we say 4 phrases. We can even be just one phrase. But just say those phrases over and over again, because the repetition, it's kind of like a mantra. You repeat something over and over again. It's not a mantra, but it's like the same function, where you say the same thing, and so you gather yourself, you begin focusing or stabilizing yourself on the same thing over and over and over again. You have a focal point, that person, these phrases, and you just kind of keep a steady, even pace, just going. Your mind gets distracted, you come back and do it again. You stay, and that helps the mind get stable and settled. If you can do both purposes at the same time, and some people find that very effective. You can just keep it very simple and steady, and very simple, steady practice around 4 phrases. And not only does it develop some calm and concentration, but that calm and concentration helps open up your heart even further. It relaxes something and lets the kindness flow more fully. So that's a little bit I want to say for now. But now, after having done this meditation, do you have any comments or questions about, especially this, any part of it at all, but especially the part about the difficult person? Would you like to ask? Or say a little bit what that was like for you? Because I wasn't inside of you, so I don't know how it was easy, if it was difficult, revealing.
Right. Well, so what was my experience? You said, well, the first thing I thought was, often the difficult person is a person with difficulties. I sort of suddenly realised that the things that you find difficult are that they are having difficulty in some way, and that was definitely the case with this person, the person I was thinking of. And then you said something about being generous, and then that was it. The floodgates opened, quite literally, and still are opening actually. When I thought, no, I haven't been very generous to this person, and that was the pain. The pain was not so much them being difficult, but me not being generous to them, and it was quite overwhelming. And I wasn't expecting it, because I didn't go out to pick a difficult person. I picked someone I thought. Actually, I picked my brother, for whom I have a ton of goodwill. Yeah. But on something specific, I realised I hadn't been being generous, and that had was obviously causing me some difficulty. So that was my experience of it.
So one of the options you have, if these strong floodgates open up and other emotions come, is that might be a time to stop doing the metta practice, loving kindness practice, and because those feelings need some time in the air, in the sun. They need to be seen and be able to move through you. And so you stop it for a while and let it come until it's settled enough and you feel ready to go on. Right, great, thank you. Someone else? I used to, one of my difficult people sometimes was the person who was doing the guided loving kindness meditation. I don't know, can't they be quiet?
So sometimes you want to wish someone well, and like loving kindness, but if that person is very negative, like when you're around them, you can feel how negative they are, and
How what?
Negative.
Yes.
So like a kind of that kind of affect me. I become negative too. So it's just very hard sometimes think about like what is the good. Even if I wish them well, they still going to think the worst situation.
Right. So the remember, it's just you can consider it a private practice. It's just something you do in your heart towards them. It's really for you. And what you do when you're in their presence could be a whole different thing. If you feel like it's unhealthy for you to be around the person, you might not be around the person. Or it might be that you're cautious of how you're with them. Maybe you don't say much, you only talk about the weather or something. You have to have some street smarts about how to be with the difficult people. And so doing loving kindness doesn't translate to becoming all sweet and loving and just be a pushover for whatever they want. You can be quite firm and strong and wish them, like they talk about tough love, right? You can have all the goodwill in the world for them and say, no, you can't do that. I wish you well, I really wish you well, but you can't come to my house if you're going to behave that way. So I don't know if that helps.
That kind of makes me think of a question that I have, which is when choosing the difficult person, I was thinking it might be helpful at this stage because it's new to think of somebody who hasn't really hurt me. And I was wondering if you could talk maybe a little bit about the difference between somebody who's just a difficult person that you might have an aversion toward, maybe even for petty reasons, and as opposed to somebody that you actually has hurt you and that you have, they're a difficult person because of that.
Yeah, so that's more the enemy category. Someone has hostility towards you or hurt you in some way. It's different. It can be harder when you feel the hostility from someone. And it takes a different consideration. One of the things you might want to consider is, are you safe now? Is it over? Or do you feel like now in the future, can you take care of yourself? And perhaps, to make it realistic, maybe you need to actually consider a little bit, okay, how are you going to take care of yourself properly if you in the future? Can you say no? Can you get help or whatever? So you feel maybe it's easier, more likely that you want to wish them well if you've taken care of yourself. That's one possibility. Another thing that is to reflect on how much suffering that person has. If people are being hostile is a symptom of suffering, is an expression of suffering. When I was in St. Quentin with these prisoners, they had a saying there. They said, hurt people hurt, healed people heal. And so the idea, if they're hurting me, I bet they're hurting a lot. And some people find that reflection makes a big difference to understand what's behind them. And, so that helps sometimes with hostile people. So those are things that occur to me at the moment. Yes?
I recently worked for a long time with a lot of hostility from someone I was close to, and I was so anxious about our interactions that I was visiting with her, and she was suffering unimaginable pain and loss. So I was really, like you said, in an extreme situation where I found myself really desiring not to add any more pain to her suffering. And I was so anxious that I did a lot of work with that. But on the way down, I drove down to see her in Southern California, and so I listened to 10 hours of loving kindness meditation tapes. I'm not joking. It was like every second, preparing, and I have to say that the cause and effect was truly in place, because I was shocked at how much I was able to be, not tense and open and really soften and really be present for whatever needed to occur.
Beautiful. So what degree was it because that 10 hours helped you have more goodwill? And how much was it because the 10 hours of kind of like meditation, doing that over and over again, kept your anxiety and stuff at bay, and you actually entered the situation much calmer?
I think the 10 hours of listening to Pema Chodron, be calm and present, and
also helped.
Absolutely was. They were. I can't separate them, but yes, it was great. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience listening to it too. But yeah, so it was transformative, very transformative to have that occur. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you. Up here on the stage. You have this. Yeah.
I can understand the loving kindness and its positive effects very much, and I believe in it. But when it comes to politics and to people, leaders, that imprison people, kill people, they do so much injustice. And if you're in that particular country, if you're one of those people who are suffering, sometimes it's easier if you're not in a condition, or in this situation. But if you're in that situation, how do you make a change happen without picking up a weapon and actually go against them? When you see that, without really, how can you be peacefully, overthrow a government that's killing your people? That's, in specific countries, not here, but there's so much oppression. The governments are, imprisoning people, they're taking their rights away. How can you peacefully survive when they use so much, weaponry? They're just, I know it's a,
You have to be willing to die.
But without...
If that's what you want to do, is to overcome a regime peacefully, you can't do that unless you're willing to die.
But that's what I'm saying. It's hard to how does one stay nonviolent in a situation like that?
So you have to understand. You have to do a lot of practice. Most people have to do a lot of practice. First, you have to find out, do you really want to do that? Is that really a motivation for you? Do you want to be an effective peacemaker, nonviolent, struggle? And then you have to prepare yourself. Martin Luther King, when he was the civil rights movement, they were preparing people for their civil disobedience they did. They prepared people. They didn't just say, hey, come on down. Let's do this thing. They prepared people, and they had trainings for people, and so by the time they went and did this demonstration where there was going to be violence, they were prepared in their hearts and their minds and in their bodies of what to do, how to be. So it takes a lot of preparation, and it might take sometimes years to do that real work of understanding yourself really well, to overcome your own fears, including the fear of dying. Because if you're going to do that kind of level of work, you have to be ready to put your life on the line. And so to deal with that deep fear is very important. Your anger, dealing with that, working through that is very important. There's a lot of things to work through. And then also you need to learn some street smarts. I have a 4-volume book on techniques of civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance. And there's a whole science to it. There's university professors that specialize in this topic. You can get trainings, big trainings. And to assume that you can just do this, just because it's a good idea, is naive. And so to learn all the techniques and ways of doing this is important. And then to see that there's been examples in the world of people who've done it. There's been in the 20th century there were some amazing examples of nonviolent resistance to terrible oppression that had a big effect. Martin Luther King was one. There was terrible oppression in this country here, and what the civil rights movement did was phenomenal. And it cost people. There were a lot of people who lost their lives in the process. But if they'd been in a violent struggle, a lot more people would have lost their lives. The fact that there's, and that Mahatma Gandhi was a big example. There's a lot of examples of people who, right now, one of the great examples is Dalai Lama, who is working very hard to help the Tibetan people without having any anger or hostility towards the Chinese. But he calls them the enemy, doesn't he? He says, "My friend, the enemy." So you recognize that there's a struggle going on, but he still opens to them as friends, to have a compassion there. And so what you ask is an important question, and we shouldn't assume that it's easy. This is just a simple introductory course, and you're bringing up the advanced course.
Yeah, especially if you're in that country and you have no choice but being in that country as a person. I'm not there, but I know of people who are.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, it's a hard question. It's also a situational question. I mean, there's been people who have done amazing things, but didn't plan it. The cause and condition came together, and this was a time to do something, and then some of them did amazing things, and some of them got squashed in the process. And it's hard. It's hard to know. But I myself am very inspired by the potential of nonviolent resistance, civil disobedience, and I think in the bigger picture of things, it has a much more positive effect than any other way. So we have a few more minutes, and I guess we won't do another meditation. We'll run out of time. But I thought that let's tell you. So now we've done these 5 categories, and that could keep you busy for a while. And you can just run through them. You can do different people for these categories, and then at some point, when you've kind of established yourself to some ability to do it with the difficult people, the enemy, then the practice is you visualize all 5 people together. Yourself, the benefactor, the friend, the neutral person, and the enemy. And you have them all kind of sitting together in a room and lined up in the panel, whatever way you like to see it. And then see if you can generate an equal amount of goodwill for each one. So that's equal. So it's not like you have preference for one over the other. So your generosity of spirit is equal to both. Now it's not a matter of diminishing it for some to make it equal. The idea is to take the really good, beautiful goodwill you have for the people you care for the most, and then universalize it, expand it so everybody becomes your family, everybody becomes your friend. And what does that take? So that's another whole process to do that. Then, once a person's done that, then the next step is to begin doing it more generally, in generalized forms. So until now, it's been for specific people. And then we start doing it more generally to categories of people. And so there are 2 general directions this can take. It can go, a particular category can be all women, all men, all children, all my teachers, all my benefactors, all my, just all kinds of categories. And just do these different categories. But it only makes sense to do it if you really have that sense of goodwill already established on individuals. So it's not just this kind of empty idealism. A lot of people have, it's easy to love humanity in the abstract. Well, I love everyone, just as long as I don't have to do anything, as long as I don't have to do anything with them. They stay far away. So you, in order to be real, you have to really kind of cultivate it first on real people, but then begin using these categories. Then the other route is rather than individual categories, you do it in directions, or geographically. So for example, you might do first, may I be happy, then may all the people in this room be happy. Wouldn't that be great if all of us were just happy and felt safe and comfortable with each other and friendly? And wouldn't that be great? Yes. And then now all the people on this block, then all the people in Redwood City, and then you do this kind of visualization of the sense. You focus, you keep your concentration kind of geographically on the sense, expanding sense. The mind gets bigger and bigger. It's like the awareness spreads out and becomes like a bubble that opens up and encompasses or envelops greater and greater communities. So then the whole peninsula, and then California, and then North America, and then the globe. That's another way. Expand it outward that way. And some people get very spacious, very open. And that way of doing it, and another way people do it is they do it directionally. Everyone who lives in the West be happy. And there's kind of this directional feeling, like that whole world of the West kind of opens up and kind of in the heart or in the mind, kind of. And may everybody in the north and the east and the south and everybody above, all these planes going above, and everybody below. And so the idea is to expand and open up this kind of boundless quality of the mind until at some point the loving kindness is described as being boundless. It has no boundaries to it. I like to think of it as being objectless. It just kind of radiates out from us without any object, without any limit. It just has a boundless feeling. It doesn't feel like it has any limit to how far it goes out. And it becomes like a light bulb that just kind of radiates boundlessly out in all directions. Your love is just open and wide and flowing. You're stable and subtle in it. It's not something you think about. It's not like you have to generate good reasons to love someone. It's just the nature of the heart, the state of the heart, when that love is really well established, radiates in the same way perhaps, I don't know, some people feel if they really do some really good exercise and they finish the exercise and they feel like all the blood is rushing and they feel kind of glowing and warm and energized for a while, it just kind of radiates out. So the same thing with that love, this beautiful feeling, it can radiate and flow from us and just kind of becomes a state of being rather than, something that's directed in any direction or any person. And in classical Buddhism, the kind of aim of strong loving kindness meditation is to get to that place where the loving kindness is boundless, where your whole state of mind, your whole state of being is saturated, permeated with kind of a sense of loving kindness. And it's a beautiful thing. And if you're stabilized in that, imagine that. You're not distracted from love. So it's a beautiful practice to do. It's a profound practice to do. It's helpful for everyone, yourself and others, to do it. It takes a lot of strength to do it. It's not for wimps. Actually they talk about the force of kindness, the strength of kindness, or goodwill that happens, and it's one of the beautiful practices. It's said to complement, in our tradition, it complements mindfulness practice. And some people will begin any session of mindfulness meditation with a few minutes of loving kindness meditation, so that when they start doing the mindfulness, there's more of a feeling of being friendly to the experience and to yourself as you do it. Because some people, their software is programmed to do the opposite. And so it's nice to kind of reset it. So when you do meditation, it's kind of goodwill going on rather than ill will. And some people really get into this practice. They find it purifies or resolves deep issues within them. It finds very, very powerful, very difficult and struggle to really work through something. Some people find that they can't really do meditation unless they first do loving kindness because they're so self-critical. They're so angry or upset with themselves that only by trying to generate goodwill toward themselves can they have any hope of doing any kind of meditation, other kind of meditation. And some people just find it so wonderful. They don't need a reason why. They just to do it. I mean, why should you have a reason to love, right? And some people make this their primary practice, what they do. And in our tradition, we teach retreats on loving kindness. And we have day-longs at IMC occasionally that we do. But at Spirit Rock and other places, they do 7-day retreats. So imagine spending 7 days where this is all you're focusing on, is loving kindness, together with a room of people who are doing the same thing. It's a phenomenal thing. It's really amazing. And so if you get that bug, that interest, that inclination, you might consider following through on this and making it a regular part of your life, of your practice. And I want to thank you. I apologize if this whole course seemed like it went very fast. Maybe we should have done an 8-week course or an 8-year course to really get a sense of it. But I thank you for your interest and your willingness to come. It's a beautiful thing that people are interested in this. And so I'm very grateful for all of you. And on behalf of IMC also, especially if you're new to IMC, please feel free to come here anytime. Feel welcome. There's no membership here, except anybody who's a member who wants to be. And some people don't like to be members, so they're very welcome too. and also, if whatever support, financial support you offer IMC or to the teachers like me, we're all very grateful for that as well. So thank you, and I wish you well.